Okay guys, so what we're going to do is talk about the info panel. Now the info panel is essentially a digital densitometer. So it's a device that can read density, and in this case it'll read the values on a given pixel or an average of pixels. And it can then give us those values expressed in multiple different ways. So we're going to talk about RGB values first, and we'll talk about CMYK later when we start doing color correction for pigments like skin tone and things like that. So first things first, we need the info panel. Now, once upon a time, I had you guys create a custom workspace in Photoshop, and I had you guys go and get the actual info panel. If for any reason you can't find the info panel, you just have to go up to Window, and then all the way to Info, and it will pop up. For the sake of the video, I'm just going to drag this out here, and I'm going to make Photoshop a little bit easier for us to see. I'm just going to hide the windows, and I'm just going to bring out the info panel. There we go. If you're curious how I did that, if you just press Tab, you can hide or show the GUI anytime you want, or vice versa. So the info panel will give you live readings in RGB and CMYK or whatever you'd like. You have two different readouts at any given time. Anytime I move my cursor into the image, I'll get a readout. Now, what it's telling me in this particular image, so I've just opened up the sample images, and the first one is basically just a dark black image. So there is no light here. RGB values are expressed from 0 to 255, 0 being the absolute darkest, pure black, no information, ultimately no detail, 255 being pure white. There's technically no detail there, but there's the greatest concentration of light that the program can ultimately utilize. As I move my cursor through the image, I can tell obviously the entire image is pure black. And I can tell this from, the fact that there's 3 zeros right here. Now the reason why I can't keep that static is as soon as I move my cursor over outside of the image to show you the info panel, the information goes away. Now I will talk about how you can actually create static points that stay. But for now I just want to explain the RGB values. From there, I apologize about that. Oh my goodness, Photoshop going crazy. If I go to the next sample image, the gray image, I start to get better values. So I get 128 red, green, and blue. Now RGB is just red, green, blue, but because the image is basically a solid tone, it's giving me the same values of each color. Therefore, there isn't more color than another. It's just equal parts. So I'm getting gray. Now this is technically middle value, and roughly, and it basically gives me 128 RGB. Now if I go to the white image, I get 255. And that is telling me that this is pure white. If this is a photograph, it would just be a pure massive white, but in this case it's just a graphic, so that's fine. Now if I go to the grayscale image, the final image, I can actually go through and I can see how this all works. So if I go to the first or the left side, which is pure black, it's 0, and as I move up, I start to get new values. So I get 32 RGB all the way through, 54, 78, 102, 127, there's your middle value, 151, 177, 203, 229, and 255. So I know that this has a range from 0 to 255 and different steps in between. And the info panel is ultimately the most handy thing to explain this. Now, if you did want to actually have points, static points that are going to stay in place, what you want to do is use the info or the eyedropper tool. I apologize. Um, there's similar tools in Capture One that you've used. Don't confuse this with a white balance selector. The eyedropper tool allows you to actually sample a given point in the image. Now on the eyedropper tool, the shortcut key for that is I. We want to change the sample size to something that's more useful. In this case, 3 by 3 average. Now we won't see a difference in these particular images just because these images are basically just strips of pure solid tone. But in an image that has greater variation in tone and color, it'll be more useful for us. So what it'll do is it'll take an average of a 3 by 3 grid around a single pixel. Okay, and once we've done that, we can come into our values, and I'm going to add static points on the black, the middle value, and the white. To do this with the info panel, all you have to do is hold down Shift, and you'll notice that the icon, the little eyedropper icon, will have a little, what looks like, I guess, a crosshair. And once you left click while holding down Shift, that'll add a static point. and you'll see a little number beside it. That number corresponds with the new entry to the actual info panel. So now I have point number 1 corresponds with point number 1 here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a second point on middle value and a third point on pure white. So now these values are constant for me, just because I've created these sample points. That's very useful for when I want to do things in Photoshop. So from there, if I wanted to move them around, let's say, I can hold down Command, and I can physically move them around. Let's say I made a mistake. Oops, maybe I want them here instead of here. I can do that. If I want to remove a point because I've made a mistake entirely, you hold down Option and Shift, and when you mouse over the point, you'll get, well, a pair of scissors. Once again, they're very, very creative, people at Adobe, when doing icons. If I click now, that goes away, and I'll add that point again. Last couple things about the info panel, really handy. The document will actually tell you how big your current document is in terms of data. So this particular document is 5.14 megabytes. What else? What else? What else? There is a set of coordinates that pops up as well. So here under XY, so this just tells you exactly where your mouse is in the image if you were a coder, things like that. Now each point has a little tiny kind of a downward pointed arrow around it. If you right click on this, you can actually choose what type of color mode you'd like. So if I wanted to work in CMYK entirely, I can change the point to CMYK. If I wanted to change to grayscale, I can change to grayscale, so it only shows me the percentage of black ultimately. I can go web color. I can go HSB and lab color. Now for us, what makes the most sense is RGB color. So we're going to go ahead and leave it on RGB color for what we're going to be doing kind of in the first and second semester. We will leave the second readout of CMYK, just because we will use that to look at pigments later on. But that is ultimately the info panel and how we can use it as a digital densitometer to take a look at RGB values of a given image. So there you go.